Everyone, thank you. I'll declare the meeting open and take apologies. I have an apology received from Councillor Manji and early departure from Dion Swiggs. Any other apologies? Would someone like to move that the apologies be accepted? Jamie, seconded Andrew. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. I'd like to move the resolution to include supplementary reports, wellhead implementation and performance reporting for April 2018. Do I have a seconder for that? Pauline. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. I haven't received any declarations of interest. Public participation, no public forum presentations advised prior to the meeting, no deputations by appointment and no presentation of petitions. I'd like to move that the Council receives the minutes from the Strategic Capability Committee meeting, seconded by Jamie, sorry, not Jamie, Jimmy Chen, sorry, Jamie Chen, that was going to be, Jimmy Chen. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And then we'll move to Finance and Performance Committee, performance reporting for April 2018. And I'll hand over to Andrew, as he was the chair of the report, but just to note that we're not dealing with the entire report, we're just dealing with the items that the committee wanted reported to this meeting prior to the conclusion of the financial year. Andrew.
Yeah, so the whole report, as has been said, will come through with the minutes of the meeting in the normal way, but there were a number of things that came up in the discussion about the report, which we felt were appropriate to have reported to this meeting, given that this is the last council meeting prior to consideration of the LTP. And we were certainly keen to pick up any things that that could inform that discussion, or that we might want to do work on before we locked the final LTP down. So the registered food premises once a year, there have been some changes to the regulatory environment that mean that we needed to consider changing that target for that level of service. But that brought about a discussion about what happens when there is a change in the environment, a change in the regulatory environment, or when something happens. And the current challenges that we've got around chlorination of the water supply would be a good example of that, the Havelock North inquiry. What do we then do to trigger a change to our level of service to reflect that change in the regulatory environment, or when something has happened which potentially changes the way we would look at a particular level of service? So that's what gave rise to item 3 in front of us today. Agrees that where there's a change to the environment, for example, an event, incident, or change to regulatory requirements, in order to maintain fit for purpose levels of service plans will be immediately reviewed by staff, and proposed changes to level of service will be referred to the next meeting of the Finance and Performance Committee for recommendation to the Council. So that means that there's, where there is that change, it immediately triggers that review by staff, and it immediately then triggers the matter being brought to the next meeting of Finance and Performance, so that we can consider, on recommendation from staff who've considered this, whether any change to the level of service is required, and so that we can get that change to the level of service in place as soon as possible to reflect that new environment. The additional staff recommendations, additional information regarding the proposed changes to level of service in relation to the general service satisfaction and point of contact surveys. Obviously, the surveys have been reported. They're available on our website. We were very keen to make sure that the results of those surveys obviously generate work which addresses some of the issues that have come up, and we've got the additional appendices to the report today, which deal with some of those issues and work streams which will be underway in order for that to happen. And of course, Carleen has got some work underway within the organisation, and particularly with the ELT, to make sure that there are some work programmes particularly designed to address some of the issues that the point of contact survey and the resident satisfaction survey have brought about. And of course, we've also indicated in relation to the EAG report that we will be continuing to review levels of service on an ongoing basis, probably through the committees, after the LTP has been decided. And of course, the resident satisfaction survey, point of contact survey, and what we've heard through the LTP submissions process will all come into play in any consideration that we have of whether the current levels of service reflect the concerns of our residents. This obviously relates to that area as well. And in fact, point 5 in these recommendations note that the ELT will be doing some work there. And obviously picks up the surveys and the LTP feedback. And then there's additional information provided, again, as a further appendix to today's report, just looking at the levels of service as they relate to those areas that came up as concerns in the surveys that I've been talking about. So there are a couple of additional appendices which relate to the particular matters that we'd requested be brought to this meeting from Finance and Performance outside of the normal reporting cycle, just in case there was anything that we wanted to pick up to inform the LTP, or work that we're saying won't necessarily be reflected in the LTP but will be done between now and the annual plan next year, or any updated LTP next year.
Thank you. I'll just pass over to the Chief Executive and invite her to make some comments.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate some of the things that the Deputy Mayor has said. The issues around levels of service, we have hundreds of levels of service. We have both levels of service related to LTP and what we call non-LTP levels of service, which are really around management, accountability, levels of service. You've seen a lot of these previously, so in the development of the long-term plan and the service plans, there's been earlier discussions around those. And also workshops around specific areas in recent times around, roads and transport and three waters. So we've had some look at those in preparation for the LTP, but it does need to be a rolling process over the next 3 years, so that we continue to look at these in more depth. And rather than at one point every 3 years, given that they're so important. I think the issue about levels of service, though, is they're quite complex, and they're often a proxy for what it is that people are actually looking for. So resident satisfaction depends on a whole range of things. It depends on your level of investment in particular areas. It depends on progress or changes. It depends on our response to complaints and concerns that people have. And just their experience of things. So it might be the experience of a service, but it might be the experience of, driving down the road every day. And roads are a good example. So one of our lowest satisfaction, even pre-earthquakes, was to do with the smoothness of roads. What people need to see post-earthquake is actually progress around things. And I think I mentioned previously, it seems now that residents have been, in the past, could see the big stuff that's going on. Now they're worried about the potholes outside of their house every time they drive out of their driveway. So it's become a much more personalised issue. So the levels of service, I think, are really important, but there are other things that we need to do, and that's why we've linked the response and the work around the resident survey and the other information that we have from the submissions and the hearings to looking at what's a program of work that we need to understand. If we think about the resident survey, a proportion of it was around how council makes decisions and the information around that, so people understand how they can participate, how they can influence decisions and what those decisions are, as well as specific areas such as roads and our three waters and appearance of some of our parks and waterways. So that we need to do better in terms of people's experience and their understanding of what happens. So some of the work we'll look at excuse me, how we provide you with better information to support your decision making, how we allow people to really understand that. So reports not being so technical, but actually being more accessible and understandable for people, and engaging people earlier before decisions are made. And thinking about being much more citizen-centric in the way we deliver services, but also in the way that we communicate things. So there's quite a big piece of work that needs to happen around that, but certainly I think that the hearings, the submissions and the things like the various resident surveys we do quite a few surveys, will all input into that process. And we'll continue to feedback, probably initially through finance and performance.
Excellent. Right, any questions? Yanni?
Yeah, I'm just, in terms of the residents survey and the, the very damning targets and the actuals around the percentage of residents feeling that they have some influence, and understanding how we make decisions and feeling like they can participate, it would seem to me that there's some governance level decisions that we need to make. So it's not just a matter for the chief executive.
Absolutely.
So I just wondered, what's the best way of getting that addressed? I mean, I'm just really concerned that these targets are not being met, quite significantly lower than target, and there's a number of practices that we have that are not helping.
Yeah, no, look, I agree, and
So,
I'm not interrupting you, but as I've explained to councillors before, some of the structures that we have in place around decision making are clearly not working as well as they could, and I've already, for example, suggested that we shift to a capital program monitoring committee that has full responsibility for the entire capital program.
I guess I was more interested in the sort of short term things, like we're currently consulting on things like master road plans or we're different transport projects, and I'm just really concerned that we're still not applying anything different to those.
Look, I think I'd rather wait for the analysis to come through from staff, because I think that you can look at some of the results and through one particular lens, but actually if you put a slightly different lens on it and you ask yourself the question, do I as a resident of the city understand why, if I ask for something to be done or the council asks for something to be consulted on, and I put in a submission and the result isn't what I put in, do I feel like I've been able to influence? So there's more than one issue, and there's more than one type of consultation and engagement. One of the things that you have raised on many occasions, Yanni, is the need to move to hearings panels and having report backs from hearings panel for decision making, or even having hearings panels delegated decision making. And I think that sort of approach is actually worth really lifting to another level.
Things like, we just had the Woolston drop-in sessions, for example, but I don't know that all the councillors are invited to hear. So the councillors are making decisions, but sometimes we're not given copies of the submissions. We're not invited to the meetings where people.
Well, actually, no, we are given copies of the submissions. I think that we need to have a proper discussion around the framework for the type of decision. And you've raised this on many occasions, and I think I would like you to be happy that you have finally been heard by me, certainly, and I believe that we need to actually make some decisions about where delegations could properly enable, for example, a community board in conjunction with maybe some councillors or representatives to make decisions.
Can I just suggest that what we do, so we'll be putting some work together to understand a range of things. Some of that will be around governance and decision making and how we can support that. And then I think it's worthwhile having a bit of a workshop to get your feedback into that. And can I and just suggest that we just complete the LTP for that bit, and then we can focus on that.
And so, I just want to completely support what the Chief Executive just said, because we've got to focus on the LTP, which is why this report is here now, and the next step is to make sure that we build a proper governance framework that will support the organisation.
Right, okay, so concerns that we've previously identified, we feed into the Chief Executive, so that things like, you know, there was a really good letter that you said about the cycleways, which had a number of actually key learnings, which hasn't been implemented.
Yeah, well, if you can do that, and then we can incorporate that, but I think it's a chance for everybody to have a discussion about how you feel that works.
Yep. Are there any other questions?
I don't know if it's possible for the community board maybe to get briefed on the odour complaints, or whether that the ITI committee will pick that up. It was really good to have that information, and I don't want to take time today drilling into the specifics of that, but it did seem that it does raise some questions around where the complaints are coming from and what's being done.
Would you like that in the first instance to be with the chairs, and then individual committees can call the team in if they need to?
Well, I wonder if it's maybe better going through the local community boards as well, so that the projects
but there's every community board.
Yes, but for the community board areas, like where there's a number of complaints, like Central
Every
and
community
Phillipstown,
board has a number of complaints.
No, I know, but the specific projects that are being done to address the complaints in those areas, I just think that would be useful.
Yep. Can we, where's the odour one?
Okay, so yes, why don't we start with circulating the information, and then we can think about what processes for getting more detailed information, but perhaps the community boards.
It refers to 10 projects happening in the first 3 years of the LTP, but it doesn't refer to what those projects are.
Okay.
Well, we can get that information.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just wanted to make a general comment.
Yeah, well, I'll get a mover and a seconder first. So, Andrew, you'd like to move that? Seconded by Anne Galloway. So I'll open that up for discussion. Andrew?
Thank you. Just a couple of further comments on the resident satisfaction survey and point of contact surveys. Clearly, you know, we've heard from residents through these two surveys, and we've also heard from residents on a wide range of issues through the LTP engagement and submissions process as well. And it's been really interesting sitting here listening to residents and their concerns and seeing, you know, patterns of concern, and particularly from particular areas of the city, and to line those up with what we've heard through the surveys, which have been reported in quite a timely way, so that we can consider them at the same time as we're considering those LTP submissions. But I think the key message here this morning is that we're really gearing up to respond to the results of these surveys and what we've heard through the LTP submissions. And obviously the analysis of the survey results will be important in that regard. Our first opportunity to respond will be in the decision-making meetings for the LTP that start next Friday, but also through the work that we're doing reviewing those service plans systematically over the next period, and obviously that could well result in some changes to levels of service to better reflect the concerns and the aspirations of our residents and our communities. So I think it's absolutely clear that as elected members, and I refer to the comments made by the Chief Executive this morning as well, that we're taking this as an absolute priority. And I also agree with my colleague Councillor Johansson that looking at governance and decision-making processes is going to be a key part of what we need to look at over the next period, and I absolutely look forward to looking at that to see how, again, we can better reflect the expectations of our community in the way that we do things.
Yanni?
Thank you. Just to make several points. One is that we also had a quite expensive communications review that cost $80,000. There are a number of recommendations in there which I think would be timely to revisit, because I think what's really important is that we develop two-way
sorry, what was the date of that? I don't mean to interrupt.
That was, I think, 2013.
It predates everyone.
Oh, predates everyone
but
here.
It was approved.
Okay.
Like it was
no.
approved.
I just wanted to make sure you were talking about that report.
It doesn't predate everyone.
Yep.
So some of us were here, not just me, But actually there was a number of things that actually, you know, in terms of building relationships with people, regular meetings with two-way communication between us and others was quite valuable, I thought. But also, you know, I welcome the opportunity to look at how we make decisions. And as has been said, you know, I have been concerned that we've gone away from giving people having hearings where people can work through the issues to quite a formal structure. I think we can't divorce the delegations issue, because when things get delegated to either a committee and there's no local representation, or people don't feel that their locally elected people can actually make a decision on something, then that does create an issue. So looking at the community board delegations, I think we need to get on and do that. You know, that's been outstanding for a long time now, and the sooner we get the clarity around that, then I think we can really improve how we do some of those governance things. There is a disconnect at the moment between things that come as part of community board recommendations to council for decisions and the information around that. So I think that's really important to review. There was a very good letter in 2016 regarding the Rapanui Shagrock Cycleway with a number of learnings, and I think, you know, it may be timely to go back and reflect on that, because actually it would seem to me that there was a number of really sensible things in there, but still I'm not seeing those be consistently applied through what we're doing. And I think, you know, let's learn from what's happened previously so we don't repeat those mistakes. I did want to acknowledge the success of QE2 reopening, and one of the performance measures that we were failing was people going to our rec and sports centres. Hopefully that one, I think, is no longer going to fail given the popularity. And the only other point I wish to make was I think it's really interesting looking at the water reticulation and the huge issue with water breaks along our water mains. And so I think we really do need to really think about that in terms of the LTP, in terms of the skirt legacy. What we can see quite clearly from this report is the huge impact that that's having, and that is very real in terms of risk. And you know, we will obviously rightfully focus on the chlorination issue, but we also have a major issue with our water main reticulation system in the city that does need to be addressed, which this report is highlighting. But thank you for providing the information and the ODA advice. I think that's really useful. There's a number of improvements there that staff have recognised, and I think at a governance level it would be good to have an ability to endorse those at some stage.
All right, I shall put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. And now we will move on to the what's called the Wellheads Improvement report, and I'd like to invite Helen Beaumont, Program Manager Water Supply, to come to the table. And just before I welcome Helen to speak to what is her first report in her new role as the Program Manager for Water Supply Improvement, I just want to quickly remind people how we have got to where we've got to, and just to remind people that on the last working day before Christmas, the drinking water assessor withdrew our provisionally secure status due to the lack of security that was found to be the case around our waterheads. As a council, we made the decision to temporarily chlorinate the water. We gave staff authority to do so for 12 months on the basis that during that period of time we would be able to come up with a strategy to remove the chlorination and reinstate or fast track the progress that we were already making on bringing our wellheads up to a modern standard above ground. Of course, council had already made the decision to go down that track a long time ago after the earthquakes. It was decided not to continue to put wellheads below ground. It was decided to bring them above ground, and that program of work had already started, which has put us in a better position than we would have been in had that approach not been adopted. The medical officer of health sat at the end of the table and told us that if we did not make the decision to temporarily chlorinate our water, he had a requisition already written that would have required the council to chlorinate. And we decided as a council to take responsibility for making that decision temporarily for 12 months in order to give staff the opportunity to come up with a project of work which would enable us to go back to our supply being unchlorinated. And so the work has been sort of fast-tracked since then, and significant progress is being made. But I just want to kind of reiterate, because I think that there's been a misconception out there that we have to bring all of our wellheads above ground for us to get our chlorination-free status restored. That is not the case. We do not have to complete all of that work before we take the chlorine out of the water. And so I just wanted to reiterate a comment that I've made on more than one occasion, and that is that I will fight tooth and nail to have unchlorinated water, as I know that every other person around this table feels just as strongly about it. This isn't a competition for how strongly people feel about it. We're all Christchurch residents. We all know that this is part of who we are as a city. And we have all looked at the Havelock North situation, and we know it's not our story. In Havelock North, the source of the contamination was most likely the pond that then was able to lead to the bore, which was part of an unconfined aquifer, an aquifer they thought was confined. It wasn't. We are talking about our confined aquifers, and it is a completely different system. They said it was unlikely that the source of the contamination was the borehead, but they did make the point, and the paper makes this point, that they didn't have a good system of monitoring. Their water safety plan wasn't up to scratch. All of the things that we do and can rely on, because our staff have actually created a program of excellence around the delivery of our water, our pristine water from our confined aquifers to those of our residents. We're able to rely on that. So the situation is quite different from Havelock North, but I don't regret the decision that we made, because we need to have our medical officer of health on site. We do need to work with the variety of regulators that are in this field, and we do need to provide confidence to central government that we are capable of making the right decisions for our community in terms of the water. So I just want to, come hell or high water, commit to this 12 months. No pressure. Over to you.
Thank you. The goal of the program is to ensure that our water supply is both safe and good to drink. So that means improving the security of our wellheads and our pump stations, and progressively removing that chlorine. So you've acknowledged that there has been considerable debate about whether or not we can achieve this within the 12-month period. That does remain the target, however, it is a challenge. So as you've noted, we will not have brought all of our below ground wellheads above ground in that 12 months period. We're not able to do that. But there are two other options in terms of getting secure status for a pump station. One is we could use alternative disinfection, so we're exploring ultraviolet radiation and ozone treatment. And the other is that we could isolate where we have a single below ground wellhead and a majority of above ground wellheads. We can isolate the below ground wellhead and deliver the water just from the above ground wellheads in some cases. So success depends in part on the resources we can bring to the program and accelerate the work program. And it depends in part on the people of Christchurch cooperating with us in a probable water conservation program. So in order to be able to deliver water to the city to meet the demand of the city and carry out the repairs, we have to take a number of wells offline. Now in Christchurch, our winter demand is approximately half of our summer demand. So if we can hold the demand closer to winter levels than summer levels right throughout the year, we have a much greater chance of delivering this program. So we will be talking about a water conservation program. The other thing that the paper touches on is the physical works that have been carried out. And here the team have been quite modest about what has already been done. So as you know, there are 4 pump stations where we are not chlorinating, and those 11 wellheads have been signed off by the engineers as secure. And those pump stations will be favoured in the future. So where we are not chlorinating, we will favour the use of those pump stations and maximise the water that we can put out into the network from those. We've also made improvements to below ground wellheads across the whole of the city. So where the risks has been pointed out, where the greater risks were, improvements have been made to those wellheads. While they haven't been brought up to the standard where they can be signed off as secure, they are better than they were before all of this work was done. We've also explored the reduction of the initial chlorine dose, and the effectiveness of chlorine in terms of a disinfectant is about both the dose and the time of contact before someone takes a glass of water to drink. So where we've got a longer contact time, we can reduce that initial dose, and there's some work being done around the city to do that. The other work that's been done, and I think people will have seen it around the city, is that we are flushing pipes where we're getting taste and odour complaints. And it would appear, at least from the statistics that we're keeping on complaints about taste and odour, that that has been effective. So there are reducing taste and odour complaints around the city. It may also be that the chlorination is slowly working its way through the organic matter in the system, so that it may be reducing anyway, but the flushing can only help. So that work has been done. The other aspect of the paper for you to note particularly is the first tranche of works for those 7 pump stations, and that's essentially where we can get quick wins. So 2 of those pump stations, the work is out to tender, and for 5 of them the design work is just being completed. We won't know the time frame for when we can deliver that until we get the tenders back in, but we'll certainly provide updates to that. Once those pump stations come online, with the other 4, that'll supply about a quarter of the supply across the city with unchlorinated water. So we're continuing to investigate the options for the other 42 pump stations, and while we have a pretty good idea of where we want to go, we're still exploring all of those options and making sure we take the best approach for each of them. And what we're proposing is a regular monthly report on progress, both with the physical works and with the options for those future pump stations. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. David and then Jimmy.
In the past sort of operation of our water supply in the city, we had a number of pressure zones that seem to, to the best of my knowledge anyway, operate independently of each other, and progressively we've connected all these pressure zones around the city. Is it possible to do a lot of work in one pressure zone and then isolate that from the rest and have absolute chlorine-free status there, or do you still need to have some connectivity to rely on pressure or flow across the city?
I'm going to invite Bridget O'Brien in to answer that one, because that's a technical question that is beyond my knowledge of the system.
Morning. Yes, we could do work zone by zone, but what we're, as Helen talked about earlier, is that our winter demand is about half of our summer demand. So what we could do is zone by zone is fix enough of the pump stations to supply our winter demand, which may be a more equitable approach than fixing all of the pump stations, some of which are only needed for a few days each summer, in one zone. And so that way we're fixing it across the city. That's the current proposed approach.
Okay.
Jimmy?
Okay, only one question. You particularly mentioned regarding to the remove all those coordination, the work program you consider prioritize all those wellhead pump station as well as the water conservation campaign initiated. When will we do this water conservation campaign initiated? When?
So the water conservation campaign is probably not necessarily during the winter,
Yes.
but we will initiate it as the weather warms up through the summer. So a lot of the summer demand, of course, is people watering gardens and lawns, and it's that demand that we'll be targeting.
So you mean that that's after the 6 months, almost 21 or some other the wellhead pump station all daily under control, am I right? After 6 months.
It'll be as the weather warms up.
Yeah.
So maybe November, December, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Pauline and then Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I actually suggest you bring that time forward, because I think personally mulching a garden is the best thing you can do to save water. And if people are planting their gardens from, possibly August, well, they might want to get things in. So that'd be one of the messages. But my question is actually, on page 10, you say you've received advice on European best practice for unchlorinated water supplies. What is that? I mean, that's going to be a big answer. What does that look like? Is that achievable? That you've got the standards that they use over there?
So we've got a draft report on the approaches in Europe for where they have major urban supplies that are not being chlorinated, but we haven't fully assessed that yet and looked at what practices could be brought in here, and as you say, what is affordable.
Right. Well, that'll be interesting to see the results of that. Thank you.
Yanni?
Thank you for the update and the information. I was just wondering, we've got a map online, but there's not, if you click on the little blue things that come up, there's really no information about what's being done. Have we got a process underway to sort of put a little bit more information about, the number of wellheads that are above or below ground, the tranche that they're in, what's being looked at? Is there any way that we can just, I guess, for people in local areas who have a, individual concern over the pump station or the wellheads that are in their local area, that they can get a sense of what's being done?
Yes, so the map that's gone up, you're right, has rudimentary information in it at the moment, and we are continuing to work on that, and we'll be providing more information.
And then just the second question I had was in regards to the ozone and the UV treatment. In the Becker report that came out to government, they make the comment that from 2009 onwards, national baseline monitoring has shown the risks of protozoa in our natural waters may be overstated, in particular groundwater sources. It talks about the outbreak at Havelock North being of bacterial origin, and that the argument should be that water supplies should focus more on bacterial compliance rather than protozoal, because the bulk of the upgrading cost is associated with UV treatment. So can you just kind of help me at a high level understand how we're weighing that that kind of overstated aspects of the protozoa risk versus what we're doing in terms of looking at ozone and UV?
Yeah, sure. So Ministry of Health and Christchurch City Council have been measuring protozoa, so Ministry of Health across the country, and they've never found a single protozoa in any groundwater supply, including Christchurch. So the thinking is that the drinking water standards are too conservative in terms of the risk of protozoa for groundwater supplies, but the drinking water standards haven't been changed to reflect that. So that may come in a future revision, but in the meantime we still have to try and comply with the current ones. The UV is an option. The focus would be, while it would treat protozoa as well, the focus would be on treating the bacteria, because that's the main risk in terms of contamination.
So just so UV can actually treat the bacterial risk as well? Yeah,
and inactivates the bacteria.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Glenn? Aaron?
Is there a chance we will actually end up exceeding the required drinking water standards? Now, I know there's still further work to come, and We know, you know, but in a measurable way, is there a chance we could actually exceed them?
Within 12 months or beyond?
Well, no, once the program's complete.
Yeah, the program's a long time.
Yeah, I know.
But we're focused.
Yeah, the current.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we already exceed the drinking water standards in terms of how frequently we monitor E. coli, for example.
Which is good.
Yeah, and also with the work that we're rolling out, the standards for our new wells and for the wellhead remediation that we're doing, where we raise them above ground, are more than it's the minimum required in the drinking water standards. But that places us in a better position in the future.
One of the things that we're doing in terms of looking at the options for the pump stations is that we want to take a no regrets approach. Okay, so we want to take a best practice approach and ensure that we're getting best value for money and positioning ourselves for the future, which when a new regulatory regime comes in, it's more likely to be stricter than the current standards. So we are definitely taking a best practice approach where that is cost effective.
Okay. Aaron?
Yeah, so a couple, Helen, and my second one will lead on from where you just finished. But my first one is around a question I've been asked from the public a few times this week, and that is around the story that ran that we had not done any work on the wellheads. Can you clarify that in black and white?
So there are 140 operating wells across the city. While the below ground wellheads are the focus of most of our remediation work, we've also done works on the above ground wellheads. So the above ground wellheads needed further sealing work to ensure that they met the standards for security. So the way that the standards and the criteria are being assessed post Havelock North is much stricter than the way that they were being assessed prior to Havelock North. So our above ground wellheads have also had some work done. So we've done work to bring 11 of those up to standard, and we've also done works on the below ground wellheads to improve the security of those. While they don't meet the standard required to be signed off as secure, they are better than they were before that work was done.
And there's definitely people working on them all the time to make them better on a daily basis.
That's correct.
Okay, just needed to clarify that because it was a weird story, but it was out there. And the other one is a follow-on from you mentioned that there may be a change in standards or a new regulation come through. Obviously, that's from the 53 recommendations that have gone to government post Havelock North. If the government picks those up, do we have a date around that at this point?
No, the government has indicated that they may have another announcement in October or November, but I doubt that'll be the regulatory framework or even the institutions. It'll simply be an announcement of the work that they've done to date on the options and signalling further work. So there's a lot of work to be done because there's the Department of Internal Affairs review of the delivery of Three Waters services, as well as the Ministry of Health's response to Havelock North.
So then my follow-on question to that, and this is one where I get asked from public, because we didn't have any timeline around that, as you've just stated, will the public get a say? And my question there, a little bit loaded I suppose, would be that would there be the option for the public to say, look, we would rather take a risk and not have chlorine if the government's going to say, look, all water across New Zealand will be chlorinated because that means we can guarantee, almost guarantee no one gets sick. But there's a lower level where it's not, but as we know, Christchurch, no one had got sick in Christchurch in our history. We'd had a pretty good program. If we get our program up, would the public get that option or would that not be on the table?
So Local Government New Zealand has been quite active in this discussion and will continue to be active in this discussion, and you'll be aware that around the country there are communities that are talking to their councils and voting on issues of chlorination and what they want out of their water supply. So I think that public voice will come through very strongly, and Local Government New Zealand and individual councils will contribute to that. Certainly this council will contribute to that discussion.
So my question then would be to the Mayor would be, would we look to do some sort of major consultation with our public so we have a platform of where we stand as a council on that?
Yeah, that would certainly be something that I would favour. but I want us to have the confidence of being able to to say, you know, we might have lost our secure status, but we've taken these actions, and as a result, even though we haven't got to the standard that might be applied in the future, we want to take the chlorine out now. I think that council will be in a position with advice to be able to make that decision, but then for the longer term works, I think we should go out and have a public consultation, because that will be a significant financial contribution to the cost that will be required from our ratepayers, and I think they have a right to have a say over that cost. So I think at that point we'll be able to go out, and I think that will be a very good basis, because it will send a very strong signal to central government about how strongly Christchurch people feel about their water. Phil.
Thank you for the report and all the work. Just going back to the what happened at Havelock North, and I think in 513 there's got reference to one of the issues was the poor knowledge and awareness of the aquifer and contamination risks. And I'm aware that our aquifer system is quite complex, and I guess though I'm just checking that in terms of the risks around our aquifer, because we're aware it is old water, and you've referred to the no known protozoa, you know. So do we, especially with the focus on water, do we have sufficient knowledge about our aquifers to be confident around that risk?
We have very good knowledge of our aquifers, and we have also commissioned some further work, and that is to ensure that our understanding of the aquifer system is still correct post-earthquakes. So the earthquakes may have disrupted aquifers underground, and we want to know what the impact of that is. We're all familiar with the change, you know, in location of springs around the city,
yep.
Particularly along the Port Hills there. So there is some checking work to be done, and we're also redoing the work on the age of the water in Aquifer 1, where some of our wells are sourcing Aquifer 1 in the city, so that's the shallower aquifer.
Right. Thanks, Helen. So a lot of work has been done on. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're continuing that work, yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Any other questions? Very good. Well, I'll move that we receive the information. Do I have a seconder? Pauline. Is there any discussion? Glenn?
Thank you for this report, Helen and team. To me, it read really well and was easy to get a grip on and to understand. Along with my colleagues, I'm sure our experience of situations and urgent matters that come our way as a city, we find our people, and pardon the pun, thirst for information. So as much information as we can get out to Newsline, I think as constantly as possible would be really useful, because this isn't straightforward. There's a lot of information. It's not as simple as an Orion map where the power was restored and we could see it from day to day to day. There's more to this than what we think. So personally, you know, I'm thrilled to have this report. I think that we could end up in the position of leading the way over standards. Could be a bit premature to say that, and we've already heard that in some ways actually we do. So I'm looking forward to this work continuing to roll out. I also have a cynical side of me over this whole thing, and what sits, not you, but what sits behind some people's agendas, but we'll wait and see. So thank you for this report today.
Thank you. Anyone else? Vicky?
I think the report is excellent. Thank you very much indeed for all the work that everybody's doing. I think the thing that hasn't come across as well in the media as we would have hoped is that the work is happening and the work is going on every day, and that we are totally clear on our goal of 12 months, and I know it's a huge challenge to get there, and I think the way you've outlined the options for each of these secure boreheads is excellent, and that's one of the three pillars upon which we rest our secure drinking water status. I think the thing that's that's confusing to the public is that they somehow think that the council is not on the same side as them. And I just want to assure anybody and everybody that as councillors we are unanimous about getting the chlorine out of the water and having a long-term unchlorinated supply that is safe and good to drink and very safe for babies and for 80-year-olds as well, in terms of the long-term future for this council. So, and I think, you know, your hell and high water, or your teeth and nails, or whatever you've got, I think express it incredibly well in terms of what this council wants. It is not separate from the community in the determination to have safe, secure drinking water that is unchlorinated for a very long time. So thank you very much indeed for all the work that's going on.
Thank you. Okay, I've got, Yanni, did you have your hand up? Yep, Yanni, Phil, Andrew, Anne.
Yeah, I won't repeat what others have said, but just to say I endorse receiving this information. I endorse the comment made that we need to get chlorine out of our water as soon as possible, and definitely within the 12 months. So thank you for the work you're doing on that. I think it's really important that we keep communicating with the public over the steps that we're taking on a regular basis. And I know in the report you talk about briefing councillors monthly, but you know, I understand we will be briefing the public on a more regular basis than that, which I applaud. I also think one thing that you haven't touched on in the report that you have responded to in questions has been that we are looking at areas where people can get unchlorinated water in terms of personal supply. So, you know, I just encourage you to keep doing that work. I think, you know, people do want to get water that's not chlorinated for drinking, and the easier we can make that for people with the systems and technology that we might have, I think that would be really a positive thing. So, yeah, I think the key messages have been said. Let's get the chlorine out of our water and keep working as hard as possible to that effect.
Yep. Phil?
So indicated, look, thank you very much for such a full report. And like, I guess certainly I've been one councillor, and I think it's come up today, that the sadness really has been the focus by the media on the failures. And in fact, you know, the list in 6.3 of 14 separate pieces of work just defies that really. And it makes it really clear that in fact a hell of a lot of great work is being done to rectify a situation which wasn't really our making at all. And another strength we have too, following the Havelock North inquiry, where there was strong criticism of the council not being involved or having poor relationships with their with their regional council as a district council, and that we're well ahead of that. We have very good working relationships with ECAN, but also with our medical officer of health. And that's that collaboration, I think, between us as governance and staff and those different bodies which will get us through this. So there's every sign in Helen's report that, in fact, you know, there's all the separate disinfection options that are here, and so we will better reduce the impact of chlorine in the near future, and certainly aiming within the 12 months.
Andrew?
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be receiving this report today, and I think there are a number of things that are really clear from the report, and they're all things that I welcome. Removing the chlorine from the water within 12 months is something that we've always been clear about. That's reflected in the information that we've heard today, and it also reflects the resolution that we as council made earlier in the year. And I think one of the key points is that there are 3 work streams, one of which is the significant remediation of the wellheads, but the 2 other work streams that haven't seen so much attention, the opportunity for alternative disinfection, so using UV and ozone in situations where that might be appropriate, and also the ability to isolate some of the below ground wellheads. So it means that the whole programme of upgrading the wellheads and bringing them above ground, whilst it's ongoing, does not need to be completed within the 12 months in order to get the chlorine out of the water within the 12 months. Getting the chlorine out of the water is actually a very different matter than upgrading all of the wellheads within that 12-month period. The ability to turn some of the wellheads off, and I appreciate there's a significant body of work gone on here already, is a key part of the solution. And of course the amount of water that the city needs to be supplied with becomes a big part of that consideration as well. Because once we know the amount of water that the city needs, once that's defined, we can then determine how many wellheads need to be switched on in order to deliver that. Where there's the opportunity to turn off wellheads, where there's a need for chlorination, that obviously allows us to reduce the amount of chlorine in the supply and in the end remove the chlorine from the supply earlier than we would be able to if we needed to have all of the wellheads turned on at all times. And I like the suggestion that there's an opportunity for the community to be part of the solution here through saving water and therefore reducing the effect of the increased demands over the summer period as opposed to the relatively low demands that we have over the winter period. So this remains a big project, but I think it's clear that we're treating this with the utmost importance and the utmost priority. I also welcome the work that's been done to increase the contact time so that we've got less noticeable chlorine in the water that comes out of the tap and comes out of the shower, and my own experience of that has been a positive one, so I'm hoping that that's reflected across the city. I welcome the regular reporting commitment, and I also want to join the other voices that have acknowledged the work that's been done today. It's a significant amount of work, and Helen, I think your appointment to the new role also shows the seriousness that the organisation is giving to this particular issue. The water conservation campaign certainly is one way that residents can help us get the chlorine out of the water sooner, and I look forward to some early publicity around that. But the thing I most look forward to is when we can make the announcement that we've achieved what we're setting out to do, and the chlorine is actually no longer in our water supply, that goes back to the pristine natural water that we all have come to expect and continue to expect in the future.
Anne, and then Jimmy.
Thank you for this excellent report, and we are well served in our city with hard-working and expert staff. Thank you for the work you've done on our behalf. Hopefully this will dispel many of the fears that people have had around chlorination, and this has been a very painful time in our city's life, and I doubt whether we will ever take our beautiful water for granted again. So we are a city of opportunity, and we are determined to use this opportunity to provide a safe, secure, chlorine-free water supply for our future generations. So the work that we're doing today, the work that our staff are doing today, will enable this to be the case. So let's look forward to that day. Thank you.
Jimmy?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah. Over the last several months, looks like every day I face the residents, either citywide or my area, ask me what is the update status, what's update status regarding to the chlorinated water, etc. So today I'm very happy, we can get a more kind of comprehensive information from the staff, and also congratulations to Helen, have been appointed as a program manager for the improvement of this water, drinking water and the water supply. That's very, very crucial, because as elected member, as a council, we standing everything in the front line. My understanding, even I visited last week in the Templeton area, one resident particularly told me that he installed a kind of modernized filter, said he cannot tolerate this kind of the chlorinated water, but I particularly told to him, no any problem. Every day I'm still, drinking tap water chlorinated because it's more safe. But he didn't like those the smell, particular the kind of taste, etc. So congratulations, that's very important. But I do hope next time, because you particularly mentioned, well presented to the council in the monthly basis. I do hope next time, particularly regarding the 21 or even 22 or 23, particularly if those the uncoordinated wellhead or pump station has been ready, where about more clearly, then particularly you have mentioned consider, is the re-advertise for those pump station wellheads, and also for the those the campaign, you particular water conservation, the water campaign, if they have a kind of a timetable, you know, make the people aware. Oh, right now we have people advertise. Even we have water conservation campaign. However, it's not. We still have the quite a few, you know, update on coordinated the pump station wellhead has been ready, so you don't need to tolerate the coordination of water. That's my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron and then Pauline.
Yeah, Helen, I won't congratulate you on getting the role because I'm not sure if it's congratulations or commiserations are in order for having to take on such a tough role. But thank you for doing the work. Christchurch has, I believe, the best water in the world. Currently not the best drinking water in the world because it tastes like a swimming pool, but it has the best water underneath us. And the term disinfectant being added to our water I find quite offensive, and never thought I would have heard it, but we're here now. And I take the Havelock North situation as really a warning shot across the bow to any council that if your infrastructure is not in line, you may get a transgression that can cause serious harm. We had it confirmed by the medical officer of health that no one had got sick or sick enough from Christchurch water in the past, that we know that we have a really good supply there. We know our infrastructure in the past had been of a standard that no one got sick. We couldn't really guarantee that going forward, so let's take that warning shot, we move on and we make our infrastructure to a level that means that we no longer have to use the D word and disinfect it. But my main bit of confidence from today is the Mayor's guarantee that the public will get a say in our water going forward. Now, whether we're hamstrung by the government or not, at least the public would have had a say and get to put a flag in the sand and say, look, this is how we want to govern our water, this is how we want to have a say in our water, and this is the water we want to drink. And for me, that is probably the best message of today, is that we will let them have a say in their drinking water and what they put into their bodies going forward.
Thank you. Pauline?
Yeah, look, most of it's been said, and I agree with everything that everybody's said. And I think one of the opportunities that we've had is to take the learnings out of Havelock North, and in that way we've been lucky, because although we've had no transgressions, we realise that there is some upgrading that we can do, and we're really happy to do that. But the upside, we know that we have really good knowledge and awareness of our aquifers. We know about contamination risks and where they come from and what to do about it. We have really good care, standard of care for our public drinking water supply, and we have really, really good water safety plan. So we also have excellent testing regimes over and above what's required, with 24-hour turnaround. And that's something that we should be really, really proud of. And now that Leanne has appointed you, Helen, as our program manager, and you're demonstrating... Sorry?
Carleen.
Carleen, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I don't have that authority.
You used to call me Ellie Jones, so... You've already demonstrated a commitment to this role. Your report's excellent, outlining the various streams of programs of work, parallel programs, long-term, short-term. I think it's excellent. I know that you'll step up to this really well, Helen, you already have. And this demonstrates further the dedication of this whole council, as has been said, to return Christchurch water back to what we had, that we could hold our head up and be proud of and brag about throughout the world. So this is a good day. Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you, Carleen. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay, I'll just wind this up then. I spoke to a journalist recently about this issue, and he said to me that he thought I'd made the wrong call to support temporary chlorination. He thought we should have let the medical officer of our health make the call and to instruct us to chlorinate the water instead, because then it would have been the medical officer of health who made the decision. I believe that my judgment to lead the debate on chlorinating the water temporarily was the right call to make, because if we'd left it to the medical officer of health, it wouldn't have been a temporary decision. It wouldn't have been a decision to temporarily chlorinate the water. It would have been a decision to chlorinate the water until the standard was met. And if councillors had wanted to give up control of another stage in the process, then that would have been the right decision to make. So voting against chlorinating the water actually would have meant the medical officer of health would have made a decision to chlorinate the water, and that would not have been on a temporary basis. It would have been when the time was right to lift it. Do you think, as councillors, that that would have put sufficient pressure on the organisation, and I do apologise to the organisation, would that have put sufficient pressure on the organisation to come up with a range of strategies that would enable the chlorine to be removed from the water while a longer term program of action was undertaken? Does anyone seriously around this table think that the organisation would have been under pressure to find alternative solutions to bringing all the wellheads above ground? I don't think it would have been enough. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It's the only way that governance can signal to the organisation who are responsible for the management of these decisions. It was the only way that we could signal how important it was for us to stay in control of this decision. So I think we have set the organisation a challenging time frame, and the medical officer of health would not have done that. And I think from today's report, and I'm very grateful for today's report, because what it has done for me is identify just the extent of the complexity that sits around this whole area, and the fact that there are multiple streams of work. There's the stream of work around ending the chlorine. There's a stream of work that is around the sufficiency of the security in order to meet the present drinking water standard. There is a measure of the longer term objectives. We'd already started down the track long time before Havelock North. We'd already made the decision that all future wellheads would be above ground. So we'd already made that decision. There's no question that the standards even around them have changed since Havelock North, and we're having to re-look at some of those in order to meet the sign-off standard of the engineers. And then there's the longer term stream of work, or it might be shorter term depending on what happens, and Aaron's articulated that through his questions, that central government has already put in the arena what their intentions are in terms of the direction around the future delivery of Three Waters, but they haven't yet indicated the strength of the decision that they may have already made in relation to the drinking water standards and how that will be regulated in the future. So we're in a period of uncertainty in that regard, but I want us as a city to be ahead of the curve, and that's because I do believe in our water supply. I do believe in our confined aquifer system, and I do believe that we've got the best water in the world, and we want to be able to deliver it to our residents' homes in a way that we've been able to in the past. At the beginning of the process, so in January this year, when I took a risk in terms of leading the decision on temporary chlorination, when I took that decision, I didn't know what we could do to achieve the first obligation of removing the first objective of removing the chlorine. And this report tells us that it's challenging, but it also tells me that staff are pulling out all stops to achieve it. And that's why I think this report is so good and should give the public the confidence that they're looking for. Staff have to report to council to get permission to extend the chlorination beyond 12 months. we're sending a pretty strong message today that we ain't giving that permission. So that means that we've got to find a way between now and then in order to provide the level of reassurance that we are going to be required to give in order to make that decision and make it based on the work that's been done. So the monthly reporting, the wider circulation of information to the public, I think that the public reaction to the chlorination, it's so different from the chlorination that was in our water after the earthquakes, so different. And I think that's because everyone understood why we were chlorinating the water after the earthquakes. It was a given, everyone accepted it. But people don't understand why we're chlorinating our water now. And it's because we lost our secure water status. We've got to get secure water status back, but we don't have to do everything before we get to that point. So thank you very much to the staff. And it's not just you, Helen, in your new role, but the whole team, Bridget, everyone sitting in behind that are out there doing the work and making sure that our water supply is safe and good to drink. Thank you very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, I've got another resolution to include an additional report on recycling options, be received and considered at the council meeting on Thursday the 14th of June, which is today. Do I have a seconder for that? Andrew, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And I'll now move that we, the resolution to exclude the public, and that Paul Munro, Chief Executive, Leah Scales, Chief Financial Officer, Christchurch City Holdings remain for the items on the agenda that relates to, and that Craig Downey remain after the public have been excluded for item 13. And that the resolution, sorry, Yanni?
Put 9 separately, or just have my vote recorded against it?
Oh, okay. All right. Do I have a seconder? Andrew? Okay, I'll put 9. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no.
So you don't want that? No, I don't think so.
Sorry. The vote is do we include the proposed extension of the council's living wage policy to council-controlled organisation and council contractors? Are we going to discuss that in PX, or are we going to discuss it in public? So at the moment, I've moved a resolution to include it in PX. So I've put it up as a motion, and so far 2 people have voted against it. So I'm going to declare that carried. So 3 people. So Aaron voted against it as well, and Sarah voted against it. Does anyone else like to vote against it? Oh, good. I was surprised. 1, 2, 5. Mike Davidson. Did you get them all? We know the reason why. I've put a resolution. We could have debated it, but I was just asked to put this item separately. Request their vote against resolution 9, item 9. So that's carried. And I'll put the remaining resolutions. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. So we are now in PX, and if the team at the back can let us know when